you practice law and you get involved in a movie and you start seeing ways to put pieces together and they fall apart, and you put pieces together and they fall apart, and you put pieces together and they fall apart, you wonder if it's all worth it.
The world in 1983 wasn't really geared to high-quality, high-profile actor art films that didn't fit into any particular genre that the business was familiar with.
Back then in the early 80s, it was a completely different world. The idea of making a movie on this subject was insane. Here is Peter Deckham, a major showbiz attorney, who does all our legal work on spec for 3 years in a film that might never see the light of day. I mean, the marketing analysis was like, a fag and a commie in a jail cell. Who do you hate worse? A marketing nightmare.
I would like very much to play against the rules, because I'm not making a movie about a gay character and a male character. I'm making a movie to understand which is the meaning of being a real man.
Promise me you'll never let anybody exploit you again. Nobody has the right to do that to anybody.
It was a labor of love, a work of passion. No one was getting paid. In fact, it was sure to bankrupt all of us. I mean, we just believed that something wonderful would happen, and if you had a good project. There was no tradition of making independent films at that time.
We did that. We started that. We did.
It did things that no independent movie to date had done.
Right now I'm looking at a glass-covered case of that time, of my memories of Spider-Woman. There is a large collection of gold, silver, platinum, diamonds, works of art. There's so many important moments in that time.
David is one of those off-the-wall human beings that meets all kinds of strange people and makes strange movies about even stranger people. His brain flies so much faster than most people can even begin to contemplate thought. He masters languages in a nanosecond and loves playing with nuance, looks for hidden theories and philosophies underlying, but at the end of everything, is also looking for a way to get movies made.
I spent a lot of my youth in Brazil, and stopped going back there in 1968 when the dictatorship made life a bit unpleasant. And then at the end of '81, speaking Portuguese fluently and knowing Brazil pretty well, I felt as if it was time to go back to see what I could cook up there. While I was in Rio de Janeiro during Christmas and New Year's, someone introduced me to an Argentine novelist living in Rio, whose name was Manuel Puig. We hit it off, and he asked me if I'd ever read any of his books, which I had, and he said, well, why don't you read Kiss of the Spider-Woman? I think you might like that. I said, oh yeah, absolutely. I never gave it another thought.
Unfortunately, Mr. Puig's work, while it was a mainstay of the French educational system, it was popular in Europe, it was a huge success in Latin America, really hadn't caught on in the United States.
And a week after I got back to Los Angeles, by total coincidence, I met a man named Hector Babenco, who had just flown up from Brazil to promote a film.
Onde, pela pressão e pela falta de vagas, serão automaticamente colocados em liberdade. Esse bairro, por exemplo...
Hector Babenco had directed a motion picture that was really a fascinating study of the underbelly of street children in Brazil, called Pichote.
I asked him what projects he was interested in doing. He told me about a book he had optioned in Brazil called Emperor of the Amazon. It was a wonderful ribald romp during the rubber boom in the 1890s, kind of like a Tom Jones in the middle of the jungle. We sat in his hotel room for half a day and talking about this project. He described it blow by blow to me. And it was exactly the type of thing I wanted to do. And I said, anything else? And he says, well, yes, there's a book that I'm absolutely in love with, but the author refuses to sell me the rights. Very difficult person. His name is Manuel Puig, and the name of the book is Kiss of the Spider-Woman. Puig was not at all interested in Hector doing Spider-Woman, and Hector persistently tried to persuade Manuel to sell him the rights. He would come to his house from Sao Paulo to Rio every week or every 2 weeks with another proposition. He'd bring presents to him, such as ice cream or whatever he thought might entice Puig to play ball, but Puig wouldn't do it.
I did everything less sex with Manuel in order to seduce him. I was expending all my best saliva and all my best thoughts and all my points, and I will arrive to his home like a man who is trying to seduce a lady is carrying a bunch of those red roses, going every 2 or 3 weeks to Rio from Sao Paulo, taking the plane, stopping in a place that we used to do the best ice creams in Rio de Janeiro called Sorveteria Moraes, and buying a kilo, 2 pounds, 3 pounds of different fruit ice creams, sorbets, mango taste, vanilla, everything that I knew that he liked it a lot. And having this long conversation with him and his empty apartment from, let's say, 10, 11 o'clock in the morning when I used to arrive to 3, 4 o'clock afternoon. He never offered me not even a glass of water, okay? His refrigerator was empty, always, besides the fact that after my arrival there was ice cream in the refrigerator, which he never invited me to share. And he never wanted to give me the ride. He never. It was not even a question of money. And I was doing my ice cream routine for almost a year. He was, in a very sincere way, denying me in all terms, without never having said the word no, the right of the novel.
Because what Puig was reticent about was a regional film being made from Kiss of the Spider-Woman, his fourth novel, and the one that was really closest to his heart. He hoped that Hector would finally get the message and go away, which Hector didn't.
Well, the one thing you can never accuse Hector of is a lack of passion. I got the image of something between a hustler, a salesman, a teddy bear, and a visionary.
I was so enthralled with Emperor of the Amazon that I said, look, let's go to Columbia Pictures with that one. They've got Coca-Cola's blocked funds in Brazil. But we couldn't stop talking about Spider-Woman. So I asked him if he could have his fantasy cast, his ideal cast, who would it be? And he says, for Molina would be great, Burt Lancaster. I was speechless. Burt Lancaster had just had a major career comeback with Atlantic City. And the idea of a macho Hollywood screen icon like Burt Lancaster playing a campy queen in a South American jail cell was outrageous and brilliant.
So David and Hector go into ICM to hustle their way to convince an agent to take them on and try to sell their Emperor of the Amazon property.
I was telling the storyline, and they asked, do you have any other projects? And of course, even though we didn't have the rights, I said, oh yes, we have this project which we're going to do after Emperor of the Amazon called Kiss of the Spider-Woman.
Just as David is busy convincing everybody that this is the project that's going to star Burt Lancaster.
When in walks Ben Benjamin, who handled a lot of the older stars at ICM.
And it turns out Ben Benjamin is kind of like, well, that's news to me. You see, I'm Burt Lancaster's agent.
I meant we're going to try to do it with Burt Lancaster. He said, do you have a copy of the book? I had to search all over town to find one, and 2 days later I get a call that Burt Lancaster would like to meet Hector and I at Ben Benjamin's home on Saturday. So this has all happened in like 6 days flat.
The reaction was stellar. Burt Lancaster fell in love with the book. And all of a sudden, things started happening.
Well, you know, it's funny. I was giving this tribute to Burt Lancaster at the USA Film Festival that I was running back in the early 80s in Dallas, Texas. And I asked him what project was he going to do next. And he showed me this book by Manuel Puig, and he said, I'm going to play an aging queen in a jail cell with a Marxist. He had underlined a lot of passages in it. He had really been working on it, and he was very enthusiastic about the fact that this was going to be his comeback role. He was really going to draw attention to himself in this role.
He was extremely fascinated by the character. And he was reading and playing part of the pages in an extremely feminine way, sometimes even dressing and doing makeup.
With the news that Burt Lancaster was interested, Manuel's ears perked up, because this represented what he was looking for in Kiss of the Spider-Woman, which was an international production.
O fato é que se ficou para a produção com a possibilidade de se fazer filme americano, rodado em inglês, que o Hector mal dominava à época também, começou a ter aulas aceleradamente. Aqui no Brasil levantávamos recursos, se tentou milhares de caminhos e alternativas, numa época que nem havia as leis de incentivos fiscais. Pois bem, isso sempre era muito, muito difícil.
Hector is like a tightrope walker without a safety net. He gambles and he doesn't know what will come out of it until it's done. Well, that's a good thing about Hector. He really risks everything.
I started the process of adaptation in a very confused and vague way. Besides cultural differences was the fact that my English was extremely limited those days, like 25 words. And I tried the first version with the same guy who wrote with me Pichote, who we started a first adaptation in Brazil for a few months.
I think he didn't even had the idea of making a movie in English. He wanted to make a movie in Portuguese, a regular Brazilian movie.
Roteiro esse que já havia sido preparado, uma primeira versão por um roteirista brasileiro, Jorge Duran. O filme começou a ganhar forma.
And David Weissman was very close friend from Leonard Schreider, the brother of Paul Schreider, who had written a couple of screenplays. I saw Yazuka that he did in Japan. And he was teacher of literature. He had worked with an Chilean writer, Jose Donoso, I think in Iowa. We put the three in the couch, a lot of coffee and a lot of bagels from Greenblatt, and David was extremely patient and courageous, and he was kind of master puppeteer, directing the work between Leonard and Hector for almost a year and a half.
But Leonard is a very slow writer, very meticulous writer. He really thinks it all through before he writes. And so Leonard would cause people to pull their own teeth out waiting for him to produce pages. Burt Lancaster was not pleased with Leonard at all. He had developed a lot of big movies himself and was used to getting things done Burt's way. But every Saturday morning I'd go over to Lancaster's office with one or two new scenes by Schrader and hold my breath. He would pace the room, boiling, holding the book in his hand, the paperback novel, and he'd almost bitch slap me with it several times. What do you think you're doing? You don't have a director, you don't have a writer, you've got nothing, all you've got is Puig. But let me help you. I want to help you. Now here's what we're going to do. And he had a whole plan. What emerged was the Burt Lancaster draft of the script.
Lancaster had his own vision of what the script should look like. So you have this wonderful movie that everybody wants to make, but unfortunately nobody really wants to make the same movie. So this battle went on for quite a long time. There was a lot of back and forth.
Burt Lancaster's involvement with the project lasted for 14 months. And while Burt kept rejecting Leonard's screenplay, other people loved it. Meanwhile, Hector's down in Brazil steaming. He's ambivalent about making a film in English anyway. Up to that point, he'd been communicating with Lancaster in Italian.
Hector many times, used to say yes to a lot of things that he was not understanding, and many times he would say no to things were incorrect because he was not able to get the full picture of what's going on.
Babenco was very nervous because it was his first big break in America.
And I was feeling not only limited, but extremely sad and depressed and frustrated because I was not able to show people whom I was.
So he was very nervous that something went on that he couldn't control. He didn't know what was happening.
Was extremely frustrated to me to see people around me talking in English and being ignored. This was the feeling.
And it was happening.
We had another problem. We needed to find an actor who could do justice to the role of Valentine. We needed someone who was believable as an authentic Latin American revolutionary. One day Hector phones me up from Sao Paulo and says, David, find Raul Julia for me. I need a Latino guy in this movie. I need somebody I can speak with. He calls him and Raul Julia committed instantaneously. He knew there was no money, but he flipped for the script. He said, just tell me when and where. Where do I sign? What do I do? One night in Los Angeles, Burt Lancaster, Hector Babenco, and I got together and watched 3 of Raul Julia's previous films.
And he felt that Raul was an actor's actor, someone that he wanted to spend time with.
And Burt was convinced. He said, yeah, he could do the kid. But you still got no script. And I'm not doing this project until it's right.
Unfortunately, Burt Lancaster is a movie star. And movie stars, like some doctors, are never wrong.
In March of 1983, I got a phone call out of the blue from a man in New York whose name I did not know, Gene Parsegian. His partner was Raul Julia's agent, and Gene had just read Leonard's screenplay for Kiss of the Spider-Woman, and as far as he was concerned, it was the best screenplay he'd read in 10 years. He then goes on to ask if I'd ever considered William Hurt. Well, William Hurt in March of 1983 was the big comer. Altered States, Body Heat, he had just finished Gorky Park, Big Chill was in the can. He was considered the thinking man's leading man.
I think that David Weissman really could not believe that I was actually suggesting that William Hurt play this role.
So I said, well, that's Burt Lancaster. And Gene said, yes, I know, but if anything ever happens to Burt Lancaster, would you please consider William Hurt? And I go, huh. Get off the phone, Leonard Trader's sitting next to me, and I said, you're never going to believe what I just heard. And he said, you know, Dave, that ain't such a bad idea. And I never gave it another thought until the Burt Lancaster script arrived. And it became clear that the game was over, that we were on a different page with Burt Lancaster, and what it was that he wanted was so distant from the piece that we had all seen together. It was very, very evident at that point that this was not going to happen with Lancaster.
But there is one image that for me is unforgettable, which is he was cooking hamburgers and drinking Miller beer like an American cowboy, but he was dressed up in red shoes and a mini skirt. And to see this gigantic monster man do makeup for me, and he will receive me in high heels and silk stocks, and to dress as a lady, to show me how Molina will dress when he goes to the dancing or go for pick up a boy.
We tried like crazy to make this process work with Burt Lancaster. But at the end of the day, Burt wouldn't move. Ultimately, Burt Lancaster didn't wind up in this movie.
A triple bypass was the official reason for Lancaster's dropping out of the project, but the truth was a bit more complex.
I have to recognize the importance that Burt Lancaster had in the construction of the project. But there were a lot of things that was very difficult to fight him. And he was always having the relation in which he was the madame and the political prisoner was the young boy, the kid. It was very difficult to me to make him understand that they were equals. And there was not a relation in which he will be dramatically or emotionally superior to the other role, because his role will never exist without the opposite role, like a tour de force between two strong men's arm wrestling. But when Burt Lancaster got sick, I just decided to do the movie in Brazil.
Num dado momento, o Burt Lancaster sai do projeto. Por lenda ou sem lenda, ele sai do projeto por ataque, por ter o seu próprio roteiro ou não. E ficamos apenas com Raul Julia e não tínhamos um ator substituto.
And I remember calling from LA airport, calling Raul Julia to let him know that the movie was collapsed.
Hector volta dos Estados Unidos decidido a fazer com o elenco brasileiro um filme brasileiro daí.
And out of desperation, because the whole thing was falling apart, what do I have to lose? I called Gene Parsegian. I said, you've heard we've lost Lancaster? He says, yes, I've heard. I said, were you serious about William Hurt? He says, yes, I was. And he says, does Hector want him? And I said, well, of course he does. Well, Hector never even heard of him.
E aqui no Brasil era mais conhecido um outro ator chamado John Hurt, não William Hurt, não Bill.
I was in a hotel room in Sweden. I was working on Gorky Park. And I think I made the call to Gene Parsegian, who was my agent then, when I was about 20 pages in. He said, Jim, we gotta get on our knees. That's what we gotta do, whatever we gotta do.
He was wildly enthusiastic about it and was immediately drawn to this piece.
I said, Gene, declutter all other activity, all other brain activity. Go for this is what I want to do. And he said, I knew you would feel that way.
Had a good sense of what Bill was looking for, and this came along at a perfect moment.
And then I finished reading the script in that room, and then just prayed.
So I called Hector and said, well, I have some news. We have an actor named William Hurt who is interested in playing the role of Molina.
Which I say yes, no matter what name will be, because I just wanted to get rid of my bad, ugly American experience of having to work so hard and not being able even to find $100,000 for the project, you know?
William Hurt recebeu o roteiro quando ele estava fazendo um filme na Finlândia e da Finlândia ligou diretamente para o Hector. Assim conta-se a lenda, dizendo que queria fazer o filme.
A week after then I left America, I got a phone call from Finland for a gentleman called William Hurt.
Aqui Hector não estava nem entendendo quem era que estava falando direito, achando até que era uma piada.
He said to me, briefly and short, I read the screenplay and I like very much. And I said briefly and short, thank you very much, but I'm tired of you Americans. Okay, I've been wrestling for almost 2 years to raise peanuts money, and I'm not listening any echo. I really don't want to make one delay in this project. I am a movie maker, I'm not a deal maker. Then William Hurt stopped me at the phone and says, I'm sorry, Mr. Babenko, I know that you don't have a penny. I'm just asking you if you will consider me as an actor to play the role of Molina. And he says,
Will you come to New York one more time?
And then I said, okay, let's do the following. Let's don't be struggling here at the phone. I will do something that I had promised my family that I will not do again. I will go to the States one more time and let's see what happens. Which we did. We did
on the flight to New York to meet William Hurt and Raul Julia, Hector Babenko ran into Sonia Braga. Sonia Braga at this time was a major star from Brazil, but moreover, she was a major star all through Europe.
Since I was 18 years old, I was the lead in the movies that I've made. And I talk to some friends and I say, look, I want to do something else in the movies. I'm tired of being a lead because you're always busy. You're always doing the makeup, you're memorizing your lines, you're always busy playing a character that you're not connect with behind cameras. And I want to hang with the crew. Although I, date the cameraman and go with everybody else, all that happens to me all the time in the crew, but you don't belong to the crew. But I cannot go to anybody else's set because I feel like a foreigner. I was telling everybody my feeling about that. I said, do you know what I want to do? I want to do a little thing in the movie. That's what I want to do. That's when Hector came to me and said, Sonia, olha, I'd like to ask you something. I don't know how you're going to take this, but would you do one little part in Kiss of the Spider Woman? And I say, yes, that's what I want to do. It wasn't 3 of them, it was only Raul's girlfriend.
Over a 4th of July weekend in 1983,
we met Bill, Raul, Hector, myself, and the 2 agents.
And me in Los Angeles, trying to lock down the final deal points.
And a miracle happened.
Bill Hurt agreed to do something that in those days was unheard of. He seriously cut his price.
And we just sat there and we made the deal for the 2 actors to work for almost nothing, for scale.
But the way the deal was constructed is that Bill Hurt wouldn't get the money that he would normally get up front. But if the picture went out and earned, Bill Hurt would make it up on the back end. That which he didn't get paid was in fact an investment in the movie.
It was really one of the most remarkable experiences.
But then, why not Raul Julia? Why not add him to the mix? So these 2 guys together made this movie possible by doing what today agents see as commonplace. But in those days, what they did was profoundly bold, very, very risky, and extraordinarily wise.
5 months in Brazil in a film that had no guarantee that it would ever get finished. At the point we made the deal with them, there was no guarantee it would ever get made.
There was a little bit of journey between the time the actors committed.
It was impossible to find money for this movie.
There was another thing that was kind of missing.
Hector always said, the money is in my pocket.
And I went to Brazil to raise the money.
And that's the money to make the movie.
To finish to raise the money.
He just didn't tell me who was wearing the shirt the pocket was in.
To bank all the production costs.
Hector, I thought you said the money is in my pocket.
David is coming with some cash from some friends in North America.
Ao mesmo tempo, procuramos recursos locais no Brasil e se procurava algum modelo, alguma forma de ter uma produção que viesse recursos americanos, algum pick-up deal, negative pick-up deal, o que fosse.
There was no blueprint or experience, there was no indie prod. You sort of just tried your best and see what happened.
Nunca se conseguiu e foi o projeto que teve a maior quantidade de nãos, todos os nãos possíveis de todos os tipos de produtores. Grandes estúdios, estúdios pequenos, estúdios médicos, produtores independentes, LED Company, Ray Stark, vamos citar todos os que disseram não ao projeto.
In those days, there wasn't this whole concept of Miramax independent movies. It just didn't exist.
Cada argumentando por que não fazia por isto ou por aquilo.
There were studio pictures and art films and exploitation films. There really wasn't anything else.
Até mesmo porque é que um dos personagens teria que limpar as fezes do outro, a merda do outro. Eu me recordo bastante bem disso.
So how do you finance something that nobody knows how to market and distribute?
I have a wonderful collection of rejection letters. We had to find equity investors, people who were willing to just trust.
So at that point, David called on some friends.
The key was an old friend of mine named Michael Maiello.
And David FedExed me the script and said, we're trying to work something out. Can you come on up and maybe help us out? What do you think? You want to get involved? Do you believe in it? And I read it on the way up, and it was phenomenal.
He and his wife Daisy, they were the believers, whether it was out of naivete or wishful thinking or simply because they had a gut instinct. Michael was the one who first committed to put actual money on the table. He then brought in Jane Holzer, another friend of mine and his.
Do you know it was really Michael? Michael and Daisy. Oh, Michael said, well, we're pari passu with William Hurt, so my money's in.
Jane and I have known each other since the Warhol Factory days when she was called Baby Jane. She even made a brief appearance in my Edie Sedgwick film, Chow Manhattan.
So we were able to put the money together from a combination of the two American investors.
E de nossa parte, aqui no Brasil, criamos conjunto de investidores.
I put together like $1.5 million, which was as much as we needed in Brazil to shoot the movie.
Quem juntou essas pessoas foi grande amigo do Hector, Altamiro Boscoli.
I ended up being one of the investors of the movie, in addition to being an attorney for the movie itself. But it was the first time that there was an attempt to put together private investors to really make a movie in Brazil, out of the usual means of financing movie, which was the government.
I mean, this story is unbelievable. You know, they called me up and they said, we read the script and we think this is going to be an Academy Award film. And I said, you barefoot, blah, blah, sitting in Arizona. How in the hell can you know that this is going to be an Academy Award-winning film? My inner dialogue was, what the fuck do you know, okay?
Muitos nem quiseram que seu nome jamais aparecesse nos créditos.
People that had some tendency to really invest in art, more than invest in art, to support art. I think that more than really believing in the results of the movie, they were willing to support an artistic project like the one that Hector was putting together.
E não estavam interessados em exporem seus nomes ou de suas firmas como possíveis elementos aos quais outros produtores talvez viessem bater a porta.
Anyway, everybody comes to New York, and the deal starts to happen.
So I was staying at Jane's, and I told her I believed in it, and I was going to put my money into it, and was she in or out? She believed in me, she believed in it, and she jumped on the bandwagon.
Because I didn't want to be left out of this party. So, I mean, it was like, I don't know. I just refinanced a building, had $1 million in my pocket, it was burning a hole in it, so what the hell?
The project was a venture and an adventure for everybody involved.
And let's do the movie.
We had August and September to prepare for this.
And we had 4 weeks of rehearsal before we start shooting.
2 weeks in New York, and then 2 weeks in Sao Paulo.
Which was a privilege. In South America we could afford those days. And this is one of the things that really enchanted Raul and Bill, the possibility of rehearsing for so long.
Raul and Bill knew each other for quite a while and always wanted to work together.
One of the normal questions you can receive is that they often ask you, do you have to remember all those lines? When I was 14, it was about remembering my lines. But by the time I was 16, it wasn't. The art is having some knowledge of why you say them. When you're researching a character, you get very, very practical. Who, what, when, where, how, and maybe why. Raoul knew that. Raoul knew. He knew acting.
The two characters in the film start like two different countries that are very opposed to each other, that don't understand each other, that have prejudices against each other. If you put two countries in a cell like that, after a while, they would either become very close or destroy each other. And as time goes by in the cell, all those prejudices start disappearing by the contact that these people have with each other. And the humanity starts becoming more apparent, and the superficial prejudices and the ideas that each one had about the other start disappearing.
If you get far enough into the who, what, when, where, how, then you can say, maybe here's my little guess as to why. The question of intention, the question of motive, the question of reason. So it isn't learning anything by rote. You do something through your quest to understand. You craft a great deal of knowledge, and then you forget it. You have all this technique, you've learned it all. Now, don't show that. Don't show people how much you know. Have the audacity to do something far more generous, which is forget what you've spent so much effort learning, and let that become your ear. Let your ear grow so you hear more.
The experience of Raul Julia and William Hurt for the 4 weeks of rehearsal and during the months in which they worked together as Melina and Valentine, Bill was very provocative sometimes with Raul. But I don't know of any other experience in modern filmmaking where two men got into each other's souls as thoroughly as these two guys.
I mean, I have a reputation. Apparently people tell me all the time for being difficult, and I think, well, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was trying to exert a higher standard. And I think that that's a gift. Maybe people are saying, well, raise your own bar, raise your diplomatic bar. But people do that a lot, you know, when you're in a rehearsal process. They'll accept less than the best. They'll accept less than what's possible. People get nervous about pushing, about rocking the boat and things like that. They're worried about administrating the entire production, about people having ego trips, about being indulgent, about crazy ideas. But he never saw any of the pushing that I did as being offensive. Because I'd knock on his door at 3 o'clock in the morning. Every night we ate dinner, and I'd have the script on my side of the table, and he would have the food and wine on his side, and we would work till late. When we went to rehearse on a Sunday, and there was the prison set was in the middle of this big room, and we couldn't see, so we started rehearsing under a couple of ghost lights, which we found. And then we were working for I think it was 4 hours at one point, just non-stop, just banging away at the scene, just dun 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 dun. And we looked up, and I looked up, and I thought I heard a sound in a corner once, and I looked out into the shadows, and there was this man standing there, and he was one of the set technicians. They were building, apparently when we arrived, they were building, and the moment we came in the room, they stopped, and we couldn't see them. And they were so touched by the fact that we would come and work that hard on a Sunday. Tears were streaming down their face. You could see them glistening. The faces were glistening with tears. And there were 4 of them. And they hadn't moved for 4 hours, so not to interrupt us. Because they knew the value of rehearsal. They knew the value of that, of the exploration time.
Raul lost like so many pounds, and we were afraid that he will die because he really was into the project, fully immersed.
At one point, Hector arranged for him to meet people in Brazil who had been victims of political torture.
We had both been supposed to visit the victims of torture. And I was supposed to go to Raul, and at the last moment I decided not to. So I waited for him in the foyer, and I grabbed him, immediately as he came through the revolving door, and I said, so what is it? How does anyone survive the experience of real physical torture with their sanity? And he said, yeah, they all said the same thing, the ones who came through it. Torture is the inspiration for experiences: pain, fear, humiliation, and anger, outrage. And the operating rule of torture is the torturee is allowed to express three of those: pain, humiliation, and fear. But if you express anger or outrage, you get more pain. And he said what was extraordinary was the uniformity with which the people who came through, what we call intact, all said that you had to identify with, somehow, with the torturer. You had to see something there to love. That was a remarkable moment for me, but every day was remarkable, every day. When you're allowed to do your work, every day is remarkable. When you're allowed to give as much as we were allowed to give, and you're allowed to work as hard as we were allowed to work, and you're allowed to express yourself and explore to the extent that we were given that opportunity in that situation, every day is a treasure. It's a tough treasure. I mean, it's a sweaty, hard-working treasure, but it's a real treasure.
There was a lot of struggle going on. It was frustrating for Hector. Bill's mastery of the language is mind-boggling. He speaks in marvelous metaphoric ellipses, and they're hard to follow even if English is your native language. For Hector, it was impossible.
Then he would stop to talk about God, Kierkegaard, or Schopenhauer, or Nietzsche, or whatever. And he would talk for hours, and I knew more or less he was talking because I read all these guys, but I was not able to answer one full sentence.
So they were speaking past each other. That's not to say they didn't communicate. They communicated on some level, obviously, but it was not easy.
Then I used to say things like, yes, of course. I started to understand, and each time then I would say why, will take another 2 hours of more conversation. Then I stopped to say why, and I would just keep it in the sure, of course. Okay, let's go to work. And this happened a lot of time in the rehearsals with Bill.
But in Hector's, in my case, there were sparks, but they were always creative ones.
Yeah.
And that added to the film.
De marcante para mim foi uma certa dificuldade de relacionamento entre o diretor e o ator principal, que é o William Hurt, que foi uma relação que foi se desgastando ao ponto deles entrarem em choque, mas que acabou resultando para o filme, porque isso provocava sempre uma tensão de set que era desejada até para o personagem.
Hector was agonizing throughout the entire period of rehearsal as to how Bill was ever going to come to terms with the woman inside himself.
The problem began the very first time Hector met Bill in person. It was in New York.
New York, at Raúl Julia's place. I remember very well. It was early in the morning, 11 o'clock. I jumped out of a cab and I saw another cab across the street in which a tall man with a plaid shirt, jeans, a bag. I says, oh boy, it's a disaster. This man is too American, you know. He's like a Montana boy. For my Latin American eyes, he's never going to be able to play this man, for whom I was so madly in love, which was Molina character.
Every single conversation I had with Hector Babenco, from the time we left New York in July until I got to Brazil, he's impossible, David. He cannot play the part, David. What are we going to do? Let's just wait till we get there.
Well, when we were in São Paulo, Mr. Babenco put me together with William Hurt to help him understand how a queen thinks. Manuel wasn't available to be with Mr. Hurt all the time, so he could study him. So they put him with me. I was a poor copy, but it was the only thing available.
Aqui correram muitas lendas sobre ele, que ele era isso, que ele era aquilo, aquilo outro, que ele era malvado, que ele era um sujeito duro. E, no entanto, não. Ele é um ator super sensível, maravilhoso. Nunca vi ele usar nada do que dizem dele como estrelismo.
And since I was Argentinian, I had been in jail. I like my mother, and I'm gay. I was Molina in a way, so Mr. Hurt used to take me to the movies, some horrible Brazilian movies about queens, And since they didn't have subtitles, I had to make the subtitles for him. They had nothing to do with kiss whatsoever, but he thought there might be a clue or something. After half an hour, I was fed up with translating everything, so I made up a whole different story. And when it didn't match the action, what I told him, he said, "Well, you just said that and it happened this." Well, I don't know. It's erratic. It's a modern movie. I remember he took me to a very nice restaurant to have dinner. He tortured me, and I was very naive at the time. I didn't know what he was doing to me, but I cried like mad. And we had big plates like this and beautiful food, and I couldn't touch a thing because he made me cry. That killed me because it was a very elegant restaurant and it looked wonderful, but I couldn't eat anything because I was so overwhelmed by the things he told me, so I just gave it up.
Todas as exigências dele foram profissionais. Era muito honesto, não tinha a possibilidade de ele estar fazendo isso por estrelismo, era uma coisa que acontecia porque ele precisava disso para atuar, e ele é um ator muito sério com aquilo que faz.
Then we went to the reading, very formal. We had a coffee, we started reading, and after the first page and a half, I was crying. I really was. He was able to convert himself. Suddenly he was like a wounded bird. He was like a wounded bird, like crawling and talking and trying to get squeeze something feminine from his attitudes and trying to hide the feminine side. And I said, oh, I'm gonna bet on this guy. I want to bet on this guy.
What William Hurt was doing with me was rehearsing. He was using me as a sacrificial lamb. For his own process, he was being provocative. And I was very innocent and very weak, just the way Molina is in the movie. Maybe Molina is a bit more schemeful and he knows how to play around. I was more naive and I didn't know what to do. He wanted to know how Molina would react to the sort of games that Valentin played. So he played cat and mouse with me, and I was the mouse. I was the miserable mouse, Minnie Mouse.
During the rehearsal time of discovery of the character, great experiences happened. Once I was called to the dressing room, and what I find is William Hurt with a ponytail, with a beauty mark in his chin, with 2 pounds of pancake in his face, with rímel in his eyes, in a kimono, really the fingernails all red painted. And he really looked like one of these hookers that you find in Bois de Boulogne in Paris. And I said, you look like a soccer player. You have a gigantic body, you have plenty of muscles, and you could be easily a boxer. But imagine if you want to be a boxer, but you would like, in reality, to be a dancer, a ballerina. I want you to rehearse this and call me when you're ready to show me something. He was totally freaked out. And then, when you will squeeze the character from this contradiction that you have in yourself, you call me, and then we decide, and we go with ponytail, with beauty mark, with pancake, with rímel in your eyes, or whatever, okay? And I left the room. My legs were shaking. My knees were like trembling. I never was so objective, but it was a moment of turning point.
Como o Hector sabia que eu trabalhava com atores e que eu tinha era coreógrafa, ele estava tendo uma dificuldade grande nos ensaios. E então ele falou comigo que se eu não queria dar umas aulas para o Bill, para ver se ele se soltava um pouco, se ele de repente atuava corporalmente de uma forma mais flexível e tudo isso. E eu fui ver um dos ensaios para observar um pouco a estrutura corporal do Bill. E foi muito interessante, porque quando eu vi, inclusive acho que tinha sido um dia bastante tenso, e eu olhei, observei e falei, é impossível. Lembro que eu cheguei para o Hector e perguntei, não dá para mudar de ator? Ou melhor, não dá para colocar o Raul no papel do Molina e o Bill no papel do Raul? O Hector falou, até já pensei, mas não existe possibilidade. Eu digo, bom, se eu conseguir isso, eu consigo qualquer coisa na minha vida.
She was the core to Molina. Yeah. She was the person who physically, because since acting it's a physical sculpturing event. She was the one who helped me find Molina. I mean, in the body.
Eu fiz a primeira vivência com ele, que ele percebeu a dimensão do que eu poderia fazer com ele. Ele me disse uma coisa muito bela. Ele falou, se cuida, porque você tem talento e eu vou sugar até a última gota daquilo que eu posso de você. E no dia seguinte eu recebi uma grande braçada de flores e percebi que então ele realmente abriu o portal. E eu só fiz então entrar nesse portal e fazer o trabalho que eu tinha que fazer com ele.
We would walk in the streets and she would, I remember she would walk about 20 paces ahead of me. And she's a woman, so I said, just walk. And we would analyze the difference between, a woman's pelvic area and a man's, or the way their spine works and the way and she understood it all. She was the one with whom I made the discovery that, Molina isn't really gay, he's a woman.
Quando ele entendeu esse trajeto, de que não era, na verdade, a máscara, né? Mas o que é esse entendimento maior desse feminino, esse feminino universal, ele começou a perceber que ele podia buscar isso dentro dele e que ele tinha isso. Então, a princípio, foi só esse trabalho, né? E era muito belo porque, na verdade, a relação que ele estava tendo era de oposto, quer dizer, ele estava fazendo esse trabalho com uma mulher, né? Ele foi muito observador, ele começou a utilizar esse espelho muito bem.
Mara was also the bridge between William Hurt and me. I've never been to the shooting in the jail. I wasn't there. I didn't see him.
Porque eu trabalhei também junto à Sônia, né, na estruturação coreográfica de cenas que ela fazia dentro do filme.
And she's watching Bill and she's giving back to me. I had to reproduce all the gestures.
That ravishing chanteuse, Lenny La Maison.
Puig would come from Rio to Sao Paulo and work with us.
He helped Sonia find the soul of Lenny La Maison.
Manuel was telling me how Lenny La Maison was because he was the person who knew it.
Oh, please. I want to be alone.
That's very good.
Why should people come to the Grand Hotel and ask for me? I never felt so tired in my life.
And the thing about where you look up, you look down, the Lenny La Maison.
He used to play all the parts and all the characters of the movie, all the heroines. He will play with the gestures, like the liver trouble and the gestures and the cigarette and descending the marble staircases. He will do all the number.
No matter how good Sonia was, Manuel was better. And he made the whole number, the whole coming down the stairs, and he insisted both hands should be on one hip. That was very important for him.
It was hysterical. He would demonstrate the movements of a 1940s diva.
Put your hands on your hip and think liver trouble.
E é sempre uma coisa como se tem uma dor no fígado.
Put both hands on one hip and think about liver trouble.
E depois é uma coisa que sai assim, mas que sempre volta.
Visita mi canal.
Un autre ne risque pas ton cœur.
The spirit of what he wants, he gave me in the way that was with me all the time. From that time on, I was Lenny La Maison.
The most ravishing woman in the world.
Manuel, during this period, was in Sao Paulo in my hotel room rewriting the script, while Leonard was trying to finish some revisions that he had undertaken a couple of months before. Leonard was in a state of shock and dealing with Manuel. He was terrified that Manuel would not approve of his work.
So I'm writing around the clock, and fortunately, Manuel Puig was in town and would drop into the room as I'm doing this. And at one point I said to him, you know, I'm just insisting that I keep this 360-degree pan that I began with, where I wanted you to hear the voice before you saw the face. But I said, now I got all new problems of what does he look like when I meet him, okay? Because it's a whole different situation. And Puig's looking at what we're working with, and he's the one who came up with the idea of, it says he grabs that shabby towel and he puts it on like a turban. And that moment comes straight from Puig himself.
Enough.
Leonard wanted Puig to like what he was doing, but Manuel felt that Leonard had removed all the humor. So Puig was trying to reintroduce the humor and to expand upon some of the things that Leonard had analytically reduced for the screen. And so Puig was embellishing. I was going from my room to Leonard's room, back and forth. It was like visiting Molina's cell and Valentin's cell, because personality-wise, Puig was Molina and Leonard was Valentin. Curious thing happened 3 days before shooting started. Hector was going to skip rehearsal for a day to come to the hotel to make decisions between Leonard's version and Puig's version in a number of critical scenes. And while we were there working, Hector, myself, Leonard, and Manuel, one of the drivers calls and said, I have some shocking news, that Bill and Raul had done an acting exercise whereby they switched roles for the day.
It was a technique, a rare one. We permitted ourselves the frustration of realizing we weren't getting as far as we could go. And I wanted information from Raul, who it seemed to me was the only person who could give it to me, about what he needed from me as Molina, and I wanted to give him information about what I needed from him as Valentin. So I dared to suggest it. He dared to accept the suggestion, and we proceeded, and we made a tremendous discovery.
When Hector gets off the phone, he says to me, "Can you believe it's my dream?" Because during the course of the 4 weeks of rehearsal, Bill had shown absolutely nothing of the Molina we were hoping to see.
Then, of course, we go running off to Hector to say, we've got the answer, which was a way of kind of putting a match under Hector's butt and saying, we're not satisfied. We don't think what we've been doing is enough.
I felt this was a test. So I said to Hector, if you say yes, we risk Bill walking off the picture. He wants to find out whether you want him as an actor or whether you want a star named William Hurt. David, I do not understand these American games. It's nothing to do with American games, it's human nature.
And this was a scandal.
Just say no.
Bill Hurt arrived first with a bottle of Polyfusé in his hands.
Say, you are my Molina.
I'm looking at him like, I don't know nothing. And he was pacing like a man in a maternity corridor, and he's saying to me, you can't believe, you don't know what just happened. Nobody told you? No, I don't know anything. Then suddenly he looked at me and says, I'm gonna play Raul's role and Raul is gonna play my part, because he is brave as hell.
So he got momentarily shocked, and that was a good thing, and he opened his mind to ask questions about why we weren't satisfied, and what it meant was then you could go in and say, well, dimensionally, Molina isn't this, and dimensionally, Valentin isn't this. That's why we're expressing ourselves this way today. That's why we're thinking of this unusual idea. But an unusual idea is often presented for the sake of going, well, hey, come on, there's a whole world of stuff we're not getting to yet. And we did take a big, big jump there.
You look like a sad man. It's more easy to you to play than angry, repressed. And it's more easy to Raul to play a very amusing fagot. But this is not what the movie that I want to do. Then I really can consider your position, neither your request. Please, I would like not to talk any longer about that. Although I would like to do another reading just for fun, if you guys would like to do it, would never happen.
That is what you ought to do with rehearsal. Try the things that don't work and be left only with what does, because you were able to put into the body the idea that failed. So then your body doesn't go, geez, I wish I'd tried this.
The day before we started shooting, Bill came up to Hector on the set and said, Hector, you've been very patient with me and I appreciate that. And I think tomorrow I'm going to have a big surprise for you. I went to the set, watched the monitor, first take. There was Melina.
He's always waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting.
We shot between the 1st of October of 1983 and the 1st of March of 1984.
Deveríamos filmar de início toda a cela, que foi rodada em estúdios
called Veracruz, on the outskirts of Sao Paulo, a studio built back in the 50s. On a constructed set with flyaway walls.
Nós tínhamos uma cela montada dentro dos estúdios Veracruz e ela era articulável. Isso nos permitia montar travelings, gruas, dollies. Eu acho que nunca tivemos take muito similar ao outro.
Then we moved outside, did all the exterior locations
with Bill. O exterior da cela é presídio que estava desativado já à época e que nós conseguimos utilizar. E algumas cenas na cidade de São Paulo. Só que o período longo que nós ficamos na Veracruz se estendeu mais tempo do que todos nós esperávamos. E foi excessivo, foi longuíssimo esse período, um horror.
O que é que eu poderia dizer, meu Deus do céu? Era tanto trabalho, o filme era tão emocionante de um lado e tão problemático de outro.
Eles tinham divergências de comportamento, divergências de método de trabalho.
Eram 60 dias e foi para 104 dias.
There was a lot of struggle going on.
The vortex of pressures.
Houve agravamento nessa situação toda que foi Cat People. Foi filme que estava escrito para ser filme dentro do filme.
I think it was going to be 3 movies: Cat People, the Nazi movie, and the Spider-Woman movie.
Então essa dificuldade em obter os direitos com a Universal sobre o Cat People.
This is Hollywood shit. I really don't want to talk about all the rotten back and forth. They were all disgusting experience for me, you know what I'm saying?
Acabou fazendo com que o roteiro fosse sendo reescrito já no set.
Mr. Weissman and Manuel were together at the hotel working all the time, and every day came out with new material and new pages. And
from some days of the shooting, I have the memories of being under a Gestapo regime, in which David Weissman and Manuel Puig will stay in the couch of my living room each day at the moment in which I'm leaving my room to go to make the first morning pee and wash my teeth, waiting to me with pages from the Nazi movie.
So there was nothing definite about the Nazi movie. It happened on the way.
Tínhamos que sempre nos adaptar às constantes mudanças de roteiro. Noites, madrugadas, muitas vezes estávamos no set, o material estava chegando ainda.
E o Bill reclamava, isso aqui, what's this, soap opera, porque ele não tinha aquilo que ele tinha ensaiado, mas sim eram novas coisas.
Mexia no dia anterior, muitas vezes, ou no próprio dia, ainda estava mexendo em diálogos.
Isso foi criando um clima muito ruim.
O que implicava não apenas um exercício alto de criação dos atores, o que implicava também atrasos da produção, mas também tirar do nada elementos de produção que não haviam sido pensados num breakdown sheet, numa análise técnica.
Bill Hurt e Hector Babenco acabaram até por não se falarem durante as filmagens.
We had a lot of fights.
It's mostly ego, and you're trying to get it set aside and find something better.
From that point on, he spoke to Hector through Amilcar, an AD who spoke fairly good English.
Essa relação foi se agravando ao ponto de as coisas acontecerem do tipo, tell Mr. Hurt to do this. E o William Hurt falou, tell Mr. Babenco that I will not do this or I will do this way. Quer dizer, eu ficava como essa ponte, né, entre os dois.
If you have a sparky relationship with somebody, does that make you temperamental or neurotic or a cruel person?
Que devido à dificuldade do Hector, né, dessa relação e dessa distância criada,
Foi excessivamente longo o período de acabamento do filme, horroroso, longo, terrível.
E que durou muito tempo, ficava até engraçado isso, né? Eu que tomava o texto do William Hurt para saber se tudo estava correto, porque eles não suportavam a presença um do outro.
E que atingiam incrivelmente todo o processo do filme, porque não resolviam.
Eu sempre digo que os trabalhos inesquecíveis são trabalhos que a gente aprendeu com eles, né?
When you're making a movie, you're always very fragile and very unstable. But I was following my instincts, my intuition, or whatever you we like to call.
Some people say, but did you have as good a time with each other as you made it look like you're having on screen? We're going, well, we're all, no, no.
Eu trabalhei em muitos filmes antes e depois, mas nenhum me traz as lembranças do que no Beijo da Mulher-Aranha. As satisfações, os momentos de suor, de lágrimas, mas também de grande prazer. Será porque o conteúdo que era muito grande, muito forte, e a premonição e o aviso para a sociedade do que hoje em dia está acontecendo.
Eu sempre achava que, acima de tudo, o Beijo da Mulher-Aranha era uma análise do poder.
People who know that the conscience of the piece has to be built free of the apparatus of the piece, and so that the apparatus doesn't distract you from the essence of your experience with it.
Do poder de governo, do poder das ideias oficiais que iam moldando as personalidades através dos sentimentos, das emoções, das ligações das pessoas.
Instead, it becomes a tool with which you express yourself.
E ele estava tendo uma dificuldade grande de ter essa leveza numa determinada cena. Aí eu vi um lenço de seda pendurado no set. E aí eu falei, Bill, pega esse lenço e com esse lenço faça como se a sua cabeça fosse uma lua flutuando nas nuvens.
Que dos tráilers.
It's the moments in which the director can exercise a little bit of the tyrannic power of seeing themselves as an artist.
You know, there's a lot. I mean, there's been no project in which you couldn't exercise it in some way, some more, some less.
Essa é a grande trama do filme. Na grande fantasia que o Puig criou.
So what you do is you simply have to say, okay, I'm going to craft the environment of concentration. Bergman did it by going to an island with his actors cutting the phone lines.
O poder parecia no filme que estava sempre como um fantasma, como um poder extraordinário que parecem guiar os destinos.
Um apanhado de coisas que concorriam favoravelmente para um bom resultado, mesmo aparentemente sendo ruim, como essas brigas todas.
I mean, there can be big ones. Where you concentrate on, you know that you got to make the love. Where you got to let the love happen.
Isso deu para ele o retorno à memória do que tinha sido experienciado, utilizado o lenço, por exemplo, como um argumento de uma referência já vivida, né?
Which means you don't get distracted by camera or the considerations of success.
E eu tenho certeza, dentro dessa trajetória que eu fiz nesse trabalho com o Bill, esse aspecto dele se revelar para si mesmo, né? Que eu acho que é inesquecível, tanto que para mim é de uma grande emoção.
Não teve nenhum filme que nós tivemos uma equipe que se envolveu tanto com um projeto.
That's the difference, and that's what we had, and that's what I've been lucky enough to have that a few times.
Ele ganhou a equipe inteira, todo mundo ficou conquistado por ele. E depois, quando ele foi embora, com o fim das filmagens, quando ele foi embora, foi a equipe inteira praticamente para o aeroporto para fazer o bota fora, para se despedir dele. Tanto que ele ganhou a simpatia das pessoas, sem falar português. Era mesmo pela sua personalidade, pela sua força, pela sua honestidade, pelo seu caráter e pela sua qualidade, evidentemente, de ator também.
No Beijo a situação era diferente. Nós estávamos saindo aqui na América Latina de regimes militares e ainda a gente não sabia onde ia acabar tudo isso. Eu acredito que todos nós tínhamos uma certa vivência da imagem que estávamos colocando na tela. Nós sentíamos muito bem o que eles dois estavam sentindo, mas nós estávamos tentando mostrar a parte humana das pessoas que tinham caído na mão dos regimes militares latino-americanos e que pelo momento o Raul e o Bill ainda não tinham sido jogados de um helicóptero em cima do Oceano Atlântico, mas que poderiam facilmente, um pouquinho mais para frente, acontecer isso. O Bill morreu na frente do Palácio de Justiça aqui em São Paulo, mas poderia ter morrido em algum outro lugar, acreditando e amando e tentando um mundo diferente.
And now, waiting in the moonlight behind the cabaret, is Werner's limousine.
Agora, acreditávamos que iríamos ter uma coprodução com a França, com a Gaumont. Por isso escolhemos nos filmes narrados o chamado filme nazista que se passaria em Paris durante a ocupação.
The Nazi movie, even today, it would be a bizarre topic. Maybe it's a bit kitschy in spite of itself. It's not even camp, because camp is like another department. The Nazi movie doesn't even try to be that. It's kitsch. Kitsch is like camp poor's brother.
Quando estávamos começando a produção, eu me lembro bastante bem, a filmagem, do principal fotógrafo, veio um telex, a época ainda era um telex, da Gaumont saindo do projeto.
It's like a German propaganda movie told by someone who doesn't care about politics.
Eu me recordo muito bem que nem um doido, eu fiz levantamento do custo de produção em Buenos Aires, que era a capital latino-americana mais semelhante a qualquer capital europeia da América Latina, talvez a única.
So he couldn't care less if she was a spy, a good girl, a bad girl, if the guy was a Nazi or he was not. He was good looking. That was enough for him, enough for her, enough for him too.
E os custos ainda assim eram muito pesados. Daí numa reunião que tivemos, David, eu, Hector, decidimos que o filme passaria toda a história de Paris para São Paulo, com duas alternativas. Tudo que fosse exterior dia passaria para exterior noite, não havia condições de filmar exterior noite.
Every night, the chic set flocks to this exclusive club with lovers at every table, spies in every corner, and the top officers of the German High Command. One of them.
The film within the film was an afterthought, done only after Raul and Bill went back to the United States. Then we began the Nazi movie. We refer to the film within the film as a Nazi movie, because that's what it was a Nazi propaganda film. It was Puig, Sonia Braga, Patricio BESO, and myself. And it was a separate production unit, finished shooting the last day of February of 1984.
I play a sidekick of Molina. The very first thing that Molina does when he goes out from jail is to go see a drag show I'm doing. I was considered a funny man, a performer, whatever, but I wasn't taken very seriously as a costume designer. Hector was very generous and very trusting because I was like a gamble at the time.
He was a perfectionist. He did some incredible designs. Characters were really cast around his drawings. Lenin actually came alive through his drawings.
I refuse to love a man who is the butcher of my country.
Nothing else matters. I'm sitting next to my mother, and she played the part in the movie. She was Sonia's maid, and she was very hurt because everybody paid attention to Sonia, nobody noticed her. But Sonia was naked in the bathtub. What do you expect?
The idea of Sonia playing all three women in the film evolved as we were moving forward. Initially, Sonia accepted to play the role of Marta, who was Valentin's girlfriend.
Babenco came to me and say, what do you think about doing the Nazi too? And I say, oh my God.
Sonia loved the idea. The Marta part was something she could just simply walk through. L'Aîné à la Maison was a challenge.
I cannot sing, and I cannot sing in French. So to me, it was like, and to some people that were there, a torture.
Maraborba was supposed to play the Spider-Woman.
E foi como eu entrei no filme, para fazer o papel da Mulher-Aranha.
And then at the last minute, Sonia was the one who had the idea that she had to play the Spider-Woman.
It was one night before we were taking off to Parte to do the character. She was coming with us to play the Spider-Woman. I thought that it was very confusing that I was playing two characters and suddenly somebody else, another woman, is going to play the Spider-Woman, and the audience is going to be confused about this.
No, it's always good to play three parts.
Because if someone else had played the Spider-Woman, at the most crucial moment in the movie, the transcendental moment in the movie,
it would be introducing something completely alien to the essence of the piece.
A extensão que existia na Mulher-Aranha, de ser a mulher que era presa na teia, é extremamente ligada ao entrecho do filme.
It wasn't a big part at all, but it was symbolic to be the Spider-Woman.
So I called her first.
Que ela só podia fazer o que ela fez, percebendo que admiração e respeito.
And she says, look, I'll feel very sad if I cannot play the character.
Que eu realmente trabalhei essa entrega, né?
But you know what? I think you're right too.
Essa entrega, né? Que você tem que fazer na vida.
So I go talk to Babenco, he goes.
And I will give the chance to Sonia to play the three parts because I think it will be inside the vocabulary of what the feminine character will meant in the movie, you know what I'm saying? Which is the portrayal of desire, the representation of the feminine attitude.
E hoje eu percebo que isso ficou menor do que a trajetória que eu tive dentro desse filme, que foi o trabalho que eu fiz com o Bill.
She plays in the imagination of Molina, she plays in the real life of Valentin, and she plays in the dreamy world of movies. When something makes sense to me, I fight for that. You know what I'm saying?
Né? Então a vida tem dessas facetas muito inteligentes, na verdade.
That can never happen now. This dream is short, but this dream is happy.
But was I aware of the film being instantly a success? No, to the contrary. I never believed the movie would ever get finished.
Because Hector Babenco, he's a brilliant visualist. But Hector's not an editor. And he's dealing with a language that isn't his own.
Hector, how are you going to select the takes? David, you are the one who insists I make a movie in a language I do not speak. It's your problem. Choose you the takes, David. I'm busy making the movie, David. So I would go to the editing room every day before I went to the set. A gentleman named Mauro Alisi was cutting the film.
And we started choosing takes and editing the movie.
Alguém me disse que o Beijo da Mulher-Aranha aparece grande quebra-cabeças.
By the time we'd wrapped, I had it down to around 2 hours and 50 some odd minutes.
Ele era grande quebra-cabeças.
The editing process was very difficult. We were very short on money.
We spent all our money on shooting the movie. There's not much left for post-production. They needed to edit it quickly. They figured to get it done in a couple of months.
Yeah.
Right. Especialmente por causa da técnica de filme dentro do outro.
Struggling with the cut was not something that anyone was prepared for. We didn't have the money for it, and Hector didn't have the patience for it.
E não se sabia exatamente qual dos dois era mais importante. Se aquele atual ou aquele filme que seria rememorado.
Even though we'd gone way over budget on production in Brazil, we'd always planned on post-production in Los Angeles, where we do the sound work and the lab work, ship up all the negative, then quickly finish the answer print, and figure out how to pay the bills later.
So Hector arrives, and we assembled the editing room. We start running through the reels, and all of a sudden I realized the movie had grown. It was now 3 hours and 15, 18 minutes long.
It came over 3 hours and somewhat, 17 reels long.
Early in the game, we started proudly screening for our friends.
It was eternity.
I couldn't get anyone to come back after the first 2 screenings.
And this was extremely surprising.
Everyone was being very polite. Politeness after a film is not good.
Tive quase que problemas pelo volume muito grande de material que existia lá dentro.
So there in the spring and summer of 1984 we sat.
We were working in one of the worst places in Los Angeles in summer. We were Pico and I don't know where.
And we did work in a pretty dismal place.
We were in a cement block.
For about a year, over a year.
For me it was like to be in a factory, awful place with no one single tree, no one single breeze, no one single woman being walking in the sidewalk.
And there wasn't a lot of stimulation. There wasn't anything else to do other than work, smoke cigars and work.
And the only alive stuff, there was a little kiosk a few blocks away with a hot dog place where they would sell hot dog. It was the only presence of human life.
So people would call me from the building, who's smoking cigars down there? And I'd be like, well, the director, what do you want me to do? And they would absolutely throw fits, saying, make him put that cigar out. And so I'd go in and go, Hector, please, I've gotten 4 phone calls in the last 20 minutes. Got to get rid of your cigar. And he'd be like, oh, no, we work right across the hall from the bathrooms. They come down here, they take a shit. I have to smell their shit. They can smell my cigar.
It was very unpleasant. I was making his life miserable. We would look at a scene, and Hector would say, he's a masterpiece. I'm sitting there just sinking into a couch and saying, it doesn't work. Nothing's working. It's just sitting there like a fried egg.
You never knew. One day you'd come in and things were pretty normal, and the next day it was total chaos, total chaos. That was what working for David was.
Uma vez eu estava colando na moviola, muito bem, e quando o David e o Hector estavam discutindo, como acontecia bastante, não sei se é por que motivo.
It was a dysfunctional family and a dysfunctional way to make a movie.
Mas naquele dia, naquele momento, a briga deles era um pouquinho demasiado, muito forte. E no momento que eu me virei, eu vi um roteiro subir para o céu e vi uma máquina de escrever sendo jogada no chão.
Hector and I were at each other's throats.
Eu realmente não consegui continuar colando naquela hora. Eu saí, fui falar correndo na outra sala, falar com a Beck.
And once in a while it did. It got physical.
Precisava que alguém tomasse uma iniciativa porque vocês iam se pegar aos tapas.
No, 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 they're not. Just come in the room with me, let them have at it for an hour, and then we'll start working again.
We couldn't agree on anything.
I mean, and that's what it was every day. It was definitely entertaining.
Eventually, we're just left with each other, and it was really brutal.
This is part of the process with these guys.
It was hell.
Everything about that film was crazy.
Almost like World War I trench warfare.
Crazy making and crazy people, but that's what got me addicted to making movies.
Unfortunately, what resulted after 2 months was hardly a completed motion picture.
Foi realmente muito problemático.
Leonard Schrader returned from Tokyo, where his brother was shooting Mishima, and he became the arbiter between me and Hector by doing his classic good cop, bad cop routine. He would say, well, Hector, God, I agree with you. This scene is just perfect, just perfect. Hector says, you see, Leonard, David is crazy. He doesn't, I do not know why he cannot see this. You know, Hector, I just noticed something. I bet you if you took 3 frames out of that shot, maybe even a little bit better. Okay, let's try.
Then in the last week of July of 1984, Hector flew back to Sao Paulo to start work on the score.
I went to Brazil before the mixing, and I went to a doctor to take a little lump they had in my neck, and I discovered that I was having a non-Hodgkin lymphoma, and this is another movie.
Hector descobre que está com câncer, linfoma, um linfoma muito sério, e daí começa o longo processo de seu tratamento.
The process continued.
O Hector, ao saber da doença, saiu da edição.
3 months.
David prosseguiu com a edição do filme em Los Angeles.
4 months.
David tinha que se virar, Babenco tinha que enfrentar.
5 months.
Com muitas dificuldades, de uma moviola para outra, mixagem num lugar, vai para outro que estava devendo.
At 7 months, something was submitted to the New York Film Festival.
Projectionists had all the reels rewound, the boxes were sitting all tied up ready for me to take. I said, well, that was quick. He said, what are you talking about? I mean, you rewound that real quick. They shut that thing down on the 4th reel.
O filme foi recusado para ser exibido no Festival de Nova York, que é uma coisa que as pessoas se esquecem.
And they saw what I saw. An unwatchable, unreleasable movie that you could not, for the life of you, figure out what the hell was going on.
I remember Raul Julia was sitting there. I've never seen him so angry. He was sitting there white knuckled. What happened to all our great work? What happened to the movie?
And I have to tell you, this was just not a fun experience.
It was like mashed potatoes.
And Gene Parsagan said to me, this is a catastrophe.
You've put so much of your heart and soul and legal work into this, you basically want to do sort of a virtual wrist slashing for what you've just done.
This is going to destroy both their careers.
And I had found out that the New York Film Festival hadn't wanted it, and I was going, well, I don't care, I mean, but until I saw the cut, I didn't realize why they didn't want it. So it was like, ouch.
Well, Leonard came back to Jane Holtz's apartment where we were both staying, and he said, well, Dave, your problems are over. I said, how's that? He said, Bill wants to buy the movie, wants to buy the negative, wants to burn it.
The film within the film was too big. The film wasn't about its strength, which is the relationship between the two of them.
Now what to do?
I mean, you looked at it, you knew something was there, but you just saw the massive amount of work that was going to have to be done to dig it out.
We had to cut the movie, and I was really unable to do it, and David was very precise and very objective and very drastic and very good at that.
There was something in this movie, but it needed to be coaxed out of it through a complete, total re-edit.
I had a flatbed truck, this huge crate of a couple 100,000 feet of Eastman Kodak negative and all the cans of work print and so forth, and the sound material.
Varou costa a costa os Estados Unidos com um caminhão de material saindo de um estúdio de Los Angeles para ação do ano em Nova York, porque estava devendo, não podia nem remixar.
This is an entire movie. Right? And we have no insurance at this point. The insurance was only for the actors. I mean, if there had been an accident in the freeway, that would have been the end of it. While we were in New York, right after those screenings, Leonard and I did 5 weeks of dubbing with Bill and Raul.
Take this one, it has twice as much.
Sure, because those bastards want us to fight over it. Take it.
No, you need it more than I do. Please, please, to build your strength.
Don't argue. Take it.
1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. In which essentially they replaced their entire dialogue. Not everything, but most of it. This gave us an opportunity to do some re-scripting.
This music is magical. I feel like I'm floating on air.
Her heart is saying, oh, Werner, you seem like a god. But your tears are proof that you have the feelings of a man.
Quiet.
Leonard Schrader aproveitava a parte que era narrada verbalmente pelo personagem. E com isso ele poder dar uma feição tão diferente ao filme.
And between David and Leonard, The movie was coaxed into a new format, almost like a completely new movie.
The way I describe the cutting of the film, it was a gradual process with number 10 sandpaper.
And you never see this. I mean, you just don't start off with movies that are unwatchable and then turn around and see something that completely captivates and motivates and is emotionally exciting. It doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen.
We were now into our 14th month of post-production by the time the film was finished. And I was completely broke, deranged, and overburdened by what we'd undertaken.
Daí, uma vez pronto, o filme continuou o nível de nãos. Daí voltou-se a fazer o longo percurso, apresentando de novo a LED Company, a B, C, D, para ver se aceitariam ou não distribuir o filme. Não conseguimos nenhum distribuidor.
We mixed for 2 weeks at Sound One in New York, and then did the answer print MGM Lab in Los Angeles.
And was submitted to a little teeny festival in France called Cannes.
And one of the first people who I showed the film to, the finished film,
was Gilles Jacob, the director of the Cannes Film Festival. He was in Los Angeles making his pre-selection for the 1985 competition.
Cannes Film Festival is probably the most famous film festival on earth. It's also considered the most prestigious film festival. It certainly was in those days. And the fact that an American art film was even submitted was amazing. The French at that time really didn't like American pretension to being art film types. But there was a Brazilian director, and it was filmed in Brazil. There was enough Brazilian nexus to it that it sort of overcame this anti-Americanism. It was a dynamic experiment, a wild experiment.
And in the beginning of December, I got this telex.
O filme é apresentado e aceito pelo Festival de Cannes em condições não muito agradáveis. O festival pediu que o filme tivesse cortes, ainda mais cortes. Pediu que se modificasse o final do filme para ele poder ser aceito no festival.
The film had to be remixed and negative had to be recut.
Faz-se isso às pressas, tão às pressas, que eu me recordo muito bem no Festival de Cannes desse ano, David chegando com material e o filme não tinha tido tempo de ter a sua cópia óptica, foi apresentado em cópia magnética.
There wasn't much precedent for any of this. I mean, this was a
hybrid production that was neither American nor Brazilian, but kind of a strange mixture of the two. And to have it competing in Cannes was big news. And so this spread around the film sales community.
And all of a sudden, a foreign subsidiary of a U.S. television network, CBS, and a small American art film distributor, Island, got really, really interested among a lot of people.
I was now the head of a venture capital fund called Film Dallas. We made a deal with Island to help them acquire Kiss the Spider-Woman. I said, well, I know that picture. That's the picture that Burt Lancaster's in. And I didn't know that over the time that Burt had dropped out. And so I went to the screening, and indeed it wasn't Burt Lancaster, it was William Hurt. And I was just flabbergasted at the fearlessness of that performance. Kind of broke ground. It became the picture to see in 1985.
From having no one willing to come to a screening, all of a sudden the phone was ringing. Everyone was curious, what is this Kiss of the Spider-Woman? Went to Cannes as a dark horse, but you could tell when you got there that something was afoot. There was just some buzz on the Croisette for this film. And it was right in the middle of the festival, which is perfect timing.
And all of a sudden, this was a hot movie at Cannes. And now people wanted it.
The screening in Cannes was a buildup of tension for me because it was scary, you know, all this attention, and we had the party, and we walked over as a group, and we sat in the front, and it was it just kept building and building.
Remember when I was trying to get to the theater and I couldn't get in the theater? I walked through the streets, I was told where the screening was, and I got to the theater and they wouldn't let me in. Didn't have the right credentials or something. And so I was turned away. I was walking down the stairs. And I think you and Hector got out of a car and said, where are you going? I said, well, they won't let me in. They said, no, you're coming in. And I went, okay. So I went in. And
the screen at Cannes was unbelievable. It was the longest ovations in the history of the Cannes Film Festival.
The people just roared and stood up and they just clapped and clapped and clapped, and we all just looked at each other.
They wouldn't stop. It just kept going on and on and on.
And people will never stop, will never stop, will never stop. This is a beautiful thing.
And we were crying. It was incredible.
I remember how surprised I was at the reaction. It was a wonderful reaction.
Pour le prix d'interprétation masculine à William Hurt, Kiss of the Spider-Woman, de Hector Babenco.
O filme é muito bem recebido em Cannes e aí começa a sua carreira, uma brilhante carreira.
With all that heat from Cannes,
KISS opened in New York in the third week of July of 1985.
Abre uma sala, mais ainda com anúncio e uma página inteira no New York Times.
It broke the bank, 108,000 first week.
On a single screen, they kept putting on more and more shows and eventually ran it around the clock. The New York buzz on this movie was incredible.
Means that even when the opening in New York came, I was surprised by everything that happened with KISS. It's a pleasure to see being loved so strongly. And obviously, I loved the pieces that came in the New York Times, who always was very kind to me. There was a party of the Palladium. I remember a lot of people, but you know, the moment that the movie is on the screen for audiences, the game is over. The game is over.
Me lembro do cinema na Terceira Avenida ainda, me lembro bastante bem disso, aquele calor assim, terrível. E foi aí, só aí, depois de ter visto não sei quantas vezes o filme, que eu percebi que meu nome estava errado no letreiro. Não é culpa de ninguém. E assim ficou e assim ficará. Mas não é isso, não tem nenhum remorso, nenhum problema. São as coisas todas do cinema.
Even the most skeptical critic any movie could ever have finally voiced his opinion in public.
I don't like the film. I hated the way it was done, but I love the reaction of the audiences. So I'm starting to like the film. Because, you know, somehow when I saw the reactions of the general audience, you know, I was extremely surprised because they had succeeded in conveying exactly what I wanted. So I would like to complain, but I cannot.
And somehow this movie, which now is a jewel, cut, polished, shining, winds up running away with awards at Cannes.
And suddenly it became a real critic's favorite. Got a lot of ink, a lot of word of mouth.
That summer, people were fed up with Hollywood and were looking for something different at the movies, something more emotionally satisfying. And Kiss of the Spider-Woman became a lightning rod. It had touched a nerve, and it also had a rather grim, undeliberate timeliness.
The Friday morning the film opened in New York, every single newspaper carried the same headline. This was, of course, the moment that the AIDS epidemic went public. My definition of the word zeitgeist.
Of course, Spider-Woman had nothing to do with AIDS, but the synchronicity was there.
Rock Hudson was a gay martyr. Molina was a gay martyr. None of us had any control over any of this. It just happened.
And what's more, this is happening at the very midpoint of the Reagan years. Another sign of the times occurred when White House aide Mike Deaver requested a print and screen kiss for the Reagans one weekend out at Camp David. Nancy Reagan was in shock. Mike, how could you recommend that film? It was dreadful. We turned it off halfway through the reel.
Deaver said, but the performances were wonderful. Once you get past the subject, it was an incredible picture.
Mrs. Reagan shuddered. But Mike, how can you get past that?
For a whole mixed bag of reasons, it was just a cultural phenomenon. I would say this, it was probably the first time an average moviegoer felt comfortable spending time with a gay hero on the screen. And this was happening not just in New York.
It was a sold-out audience on a weekday night in a 500-seat theater in Dallas, Texas. And all these people were watching Kiss of the Spider-Woman. And it was a movie about a homosexual and a Marxist in a jail cell together. And then there was that scene where the candle was blown out, and it had William Hurt, who was, at the time, a major studio box office draw. in a role unlike any of his fans would have ever expected.
Then the rollout began. One theater in Los Angeles, one theater in Chicago, one theater in Boston,
Philadelphia, San Francisco, week after week. The intensity of business kept holding, and it was all word of mouth. There was just tremendous want-to-see on this picture.
I'm not sure, whether or not Island, I don't think they ever really knew the hit they had on their hands, and they tried to break out and release it, and they couldn't handle the number of bookings because it was a small company. I mean, the phones rang off the hook to book that picture. It's just that it became a real hit.
And it was hard to believe this was happening internationally. Something about the movie appealed to the same audience element that was emerging in every culture at that time. And we didn't really have a distributor who could handle this kind of worldwide reaction.
Naquele momento, já tínhamos agente de vendas internacional que era a CBS. Uma companhia que não era uma distribuidora de cinema, que fez branch, ramo para distribuir filme e nunca mais veio distribuir também posteriormente. Também desapareceu depois de alguns poucos filmes.
This was before Harvey Weinstein. There was no Miramax marketing machine in existence yet. Without any hype, the film worked wherever it played, and because it moved people on a gut level.
All through the fall, it kept building and building and building,
riding this incredibly powerful wave of emotional reaction. And by January, when award season started, Kiss of the Spider-Woman was the most widely acclaimed film of the year on all the top 10 lists, collecting top honors in Europe, like the BAFTA Award for Best Actor in the UK, the David de Donatello, the top acting prize in Italy. Then things became surreal. There was a Golden Globes night, the very first Independent Spirit Award, and most astonishing of all,
getting the Academy Award nominations for Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Director, Best Screenplay, Adaptation, things that were not supposed to happen in independent movies. Basically, the independent world was off in a cave and not allowed to come out into the Oscar world. But you know what? That all changed.
This was the beginning of indie films. It never happened before.
I remember that I was at the hotel. I went to the garage, and the Mexican guy who was taking care of the cast, "Cuatro, señor Babenco." I didn't know what the guy was talking about. I didn't know about nominations. I didn't know about dates, about readings. I didn't know anything about it. When this guy said to me in the morning, I said, "What he's talking about?" I digo, "¿Qué estás hablando?" Me dice, "4 nominaciones para el Oscar, El beso de la mujer araña." Digo, ¿cómo lo sabes? Dice, "It's in the radio." Then I start to put together the pieces, and the early breakfast at David Place was because there was the announcement and everybody was expecting. And obviously I remember that for weeks David saying and giving dates and something was going to happen. And I was always putting my face, which was like a face that I bought in the supermarket, which is sure, of course. I was doing the same answer just to not let people feel uncomfortable. Then I was not understanding what they were saying. And also, I always had this cold attitude because when good things happen in my life, I was not expecting for them to happen. Then why should I put myself in the process of anxiety, believing that certain things could happen?
The day of the Oscars, everybody was very nervous and crazy about what they were going to wear. I had my tuxedo from Brazil and I went for a shirt and it was fine. I made no fuss about it. And Sonia had a Bob Mackie dress, and the producer, Mr. Weissman, kept yelling at me, and I said, "Well, enough is enough."
I remember a fight between Patricia Vici and David.
So I slapped him on the face.
Patricia was hysterical, our beautiful friend, and the inspirator of so many things. Having an hysterical attack, perfect prima donna, was so beautiful. I put him in our car, all these gigantic limousines.
So I went to the ceremony on the fourth year, way up in the back.
I sat so far up. I don't think there were binoculars strong enough to see what was going on down on the stage.
It was so far, and we saw it so little, I had to remember what the numbers were about.
And we went to the party. We went to this ceremony, and I have great memories of Raúl. Raúl is only short in his name. Raúl is like a gigantic man. He should have 15 first name before the last name, because Raúl is the impersonation of good feelings. Raúl is always pro-happiness.
People were surprised Raúl was not nominated for Best Actor along with Bill, as they both had been for the Golden Globes. But the competition that night was formidable, and it included 2 former winners of the Oscar for Best Actor.
And I was very happy when Bill Hurt was announced Best Actor. And obviously I was in great expectation. I had rehearsal like 2,575 and a half speeches, but non-written, and says, let's play by heart, which I always do.
I was stunned. Bill Hurt, his agent's gamble, pays off. He's the best actor. An Academy Award for Best Actor for this art film.
But I will say that none of that what happened was expected, for sure.
Sonia and I are sitting in the front row with Sean Ferrer and his mom, Audrey Hepburn, and more than 20 feet away from Billy Wilder and Akira Kurosawa on stage reading the Best Picture nominees. When John Huston read my name as producer of Kiss of the Spider-Woman,
It's the high moment of my life. Never imagined anything like that could ever happen.
The thing about all the reactions to Spider-Woman, the Academy Awards were wonderful, but they were acceptable because nothing had been connived. I mean, no anticipation that anybody would respond at all. What mattered to me was that it was good.
But here is William Hurt in an independent film, not released by a major studio, without the big publicity expenditure hype, winning this award. Now, everybody thinks that the world of independent movies started with Pulp Fiction. No, folks, it didn't. It started with Kiss of the Spider-Woman, and it broke the mold and inspired a lot of people to go out and take creative chances.
You're just saying what you think the truth is, and then the other person or people can say what they think the truth is. And if it happens to be good, it happens to be good. If it wasn't, that's okay. That's when you feel best.
Or somebody who comes to talk to you about something intelligent they've read in your movie. Means these little things, you carry like small little medals in your lapel. And that's it. Then the parties, and I arrived at the hotel like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. And the night portier, he gave me a big box and said there was a gift. And the gift was called nominee Oscar. And I says, maybe the Academy has a kind of consolation Oscar. And I went to the room and I opened it immediately, this gigantic box, and it was a food blender called Oscar. I think to grate onions and to squeeze oranges and to peel potatoes. And I felt so ridiculous, and at the same time I was having fun, and I sit down in a couch, and I heard in the corridor some voices. The ladies who were cleaning the room were starting their work. It was almost 7 o'clock in the morning, and I asked her, which is your name? She said to me, I said, Manuela. She says, Manuela, I will have a gift for you. And I give an Oscar to Manuela.
Well, after 20 years that the movie was made, you realized how much it changed everybody's life. So it was like before and after. Before Spider-Woman, things were happening like this, and after Kiss, things happened in a different way.
And I think it never realized its full potential, even though it's a picture that's still today. We showed it here at the AFI about 2 weeks ago, and the fellows here were mesmerized. They're absolutely captivated by the power of this picture and about the relevance and the newness of the story. So it works. Did then, does now.
And it's funny how, when you go to the movie, you sit down and you're there for a couple hours and you leave. It's different when it's years. It's like climbing Mount Everest backwards without a Sherpa. But somehow we made it to the top.
The real part is when you're making it and what you hope someone gets. I mean, much more important, the letter I received years later. 5-page letter handwritten in the most meticulous handwriting from a woman who had seen it a number of times, and she detailed in the most wonderful language everything you or I or Hector or Manuel or Raoul or anyone could have wanted anyone to see in that film. Her son had committed suicide, and she'd been thinking about it for a long time herself, and she saw the film. And she didn't, it wasn't just some rousing, sentimental, sort of inspirational experience for her. It was very, very specific about its evaluation of the purpose of life.
These are the moments in which you feel proud of yourself.
Não, a produção, veja, eu mantive a calma o tempo inteiro. Isso sempre era muito, muito difícil. Mas foi feito, com sacrifícios e dores de estômago, dores de alma, nascimentos disto e daquilo. Okay? Essa é a história do filme.
I'd never been invited by a client to an Academy Award, and I had clients who'd been nominated before. It was the only time I've ever attended the Academy Awards, I will tell you. And it was worth it because it's the little engine that could, and it did.
The way I remember, it was very intense, but you know what? That was one of the best time in my life, actually.
Just the whole team, family type thing, getting to know everybody, and it was a roller coaster ride, but it was exciting.
It really was a collaboration of a lot of people.
The script, the environment, the people are there, very much making the specific act of execution as generous as the intention. The human soul is a lot larger than the cup provided by society to contain it. And so we're always trying to pour our bounty into receptacles that are really way too shallow to receive them. And so Spider-Woman, your cup literally runneth over in the best sense.
É incrível que depois de tantos anos, de 20 anos, eu esteja falando no filme. Tenho quase certeza que a grandeza da história, o vigor da história e a atuação dos atores e uma espécie de atemporalidade podem comover bastante as plateias de sempre. Ou seja, é muito provável que este filme, uma peça de cinema que seja assim incrivelmente efêmera, permita para nós uma visita a uma obra eterna. Eu acho que é muito curioso isso e me deixa muito feliz de ter trabalhado nela.